Right. So this week, we've been digging into all this stuff you sent in about developmental coordination disorder.
DCD.
Right. DCD.
Yeah.
And I got to say, one thing that's really stood out is just how much kids with this
Yeah.
DCD, how much they struggle with just basic motor skills, like
Right.
the things most of us never even think twice about.
Right.
Getting dressed,
Absolutely.
writing,
Yeah.
so someone can actually read it, or even like riding a bike.
Yep.
Those things can be a huge hurdle for these kids.
Absolutely. And I think what's important to remember, and the sources really highlighted this, is that it's not like they just grow out of it.
Yeah.
It's not just a phase. This is something that can really stick with them. And it can have these long-term effects, going way beyond just the physical stuff and into their social lives, how they feel about themselves, their emotional well-being. And it's not exactly rare either.
Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, about 5% of school-aged kids. And it does seem to be more common in boys.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting, right? You'd think with a name like developmental coordination disorder that the problems would be, pretty much limited to motor skills. Like, okay, they're clumsy, they trip a lot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you sent over all this research that shows there's actually this surprisingly high overlap with other developmental stuff. We're talking about ADHD, language issues, reading difficulties, even things like social, emotional, or behavioral problems. Like some of those co-occurrence rates are pretty wild. 60% for both ADHD and language impairment.
Wow.
And even higher when you look at social, emotional stuff, like 80% or more.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you think, right? Because if it was just about moving their bodies, why would we see such a strong connection with things like paying attention, understanding and using language, or even managing emotions? It's like there's something more going on, something deeper that ties all this together.
Exactly. Which brings us to the big question we wanted to dive into today. If DCD is at its core a motor skill issue, why are researchers spending so much time looking at thinking skills? Specifically things like self-regulation and metacognition. It seems like they're realizing it's not just about if they can physically do something, but about how they learn and use those motor skills to begin with.
I think that's a great way to put it. And the research really does highlight this shift in how we're understanding DCD. I mean, the more traditional view, the kind of go-to explanation for a long time was that it was all about problems with how the brain processed sensory information and then told the body what to do. Almost like there was this glitch in the wiring.
Right.
But as we saw in the research, that idea hasn't really held up consistently. It doesn't quite account for everything we see in kids with DCD.
So it's more complicated than just saying, oh, the wiring's a bit off.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And what we're seeing now is this move towards what they call a cognitive learning paradigm in the literature. And this idea suggests that kids with DCD, they might not have as many of those thinking skills that are super important for learning any new skill, motor skills included.
So instead of the muscles themselves not working right, it's more about their brain having trouble figuring out the steps, the strategies they need to use for a physical task.
Exactly. It's like they've got fewer tools in their mental toolkit when it comes to learning these new skills.
And we should probably say up front, this whole area of research, this whole self-regulation and metacognition and DCD thing.
It's still pretty new.
Right. It's like cutting-edge stuff.
Absolutely. It's a really fascinating area because we're really just starting to understand these connections.
Okay, well, let's try to understand them better.
Yeah.
So we keep using these terms, self-regulation and metacognition.
Sure.
What exactly do they mean in this context? What definition should we be working with here?
Yeah, good point. Let's start with self-regulation. So basically, the way the research talks about it, self-regulation, or SR for short, is about how well you can use your thinking skills to manage tasks. It's like having this well-organized approach to learning that helps you stay on track.
Right.
And there are several key steps involved. First, you've got to set goals, right? Like figure out what you want to achieve. Then you make plans to get there. You got to think about what steps you need to take. And as you're working towards that goal, you're paying attention to what you're doing, noticing if things are going as planned. And if they're not, you adjust your approach, you tweak things, you try different strategies.
And then at the end, you kind of look back and see how it went.
Yeah, you evaluate how well you did and what you learned along the way. So it's this whole cycle of thinking before, during, and after.
I like that.
Yeah. And one thing that the research emphasizes is that when you're good at this whole self-regulation thing, it doesn't just stay in one little area of your life. Like, you're better at taking what you learned in one situation and using it in others.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And you also tend to be more motivated to learn new things in the first place. You see challenges as opportunities, you're more likely to stick with things even when they get tough. You don't give up as easily.
That makes sense. It sounds like these are skills that would be useful pretty much anywhere, not just for motor stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So how do researchers actually study this self-regulation thing? What are the frameworks they use?
Well, one really important perspective is the social cognitive view, and a lot of this comes from the work of Albert Bandura.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So Bandura's theory, it basically says that how well we regulate our own actions and performance boils down to three main things that all kind of work together.
Okay.
One is self-observation, so just paying attention to what we're doing. Then there's self-judgment, which is comparing what we're doing to some kind of standard or goal we've set for ourselves. And then the third piece is self-reaction. And that's all about how we feel and what we choose to do next based on that comparison we just made.
So we watch ourselves,
Yeah.
we judge ourselves, and then we react accordingly.
Right. And then on top of that, Bandura also talked about self-efficacy.
I remember that. It's like how much you believe in yourself to actually pull something off.
Yeah, exactly. It's your belief in your ability to succeed at whatever challenge you're facing. And the idea is that if you have high self-efficacy, if you really believe you can do it, you're more likely to set those challenging goals and you're going to stick with them even when things get tough.
And the more you succeed, the more your self-efficacy goes up.
Exactly. It's like this positive feedback loop. And the goals themselves, they give you a way to measure your progress so you can actually see that you're moving forward.
Okay, so that's Bandura.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other ways researchers look at self-regulation? I feel like there were a couple of other models mentioned in the stuff you sent over.
Oh, for sure. Another really influential model is the one developed by Barry Zimmerman and Dale Shunk.
Okay.
And they talk about self-regulation as a cycle that happens in three phases: forethought, performance, and self-reflection.
I see. So like planning, doing, and then reviewing.
Exactly. So in that forethought phase, you're kind of getting yourself ready to learn. You're setting goals. You're figuring out what strategies you're going to use. You're really setting the stage. Then during the performance phase, you're putting those strategies to work. Maybe you're talking yourself through the steps. Maybe you're getting feedback to keep yourself on track, whatever it takes.
And then self-reflection is where you look back.
Exactly. You look back at what you did, you think about what worked, what didn't work, and you use that information to make adjustments for next time. It's this continuous loop of planning, doing, and learning from experience.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just a one-time thing.
No, it's ongoing.
It's a process.
It is. And weaving through this whole process is motivation. Like, why are you doing this in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And the research talks about two main types of motivation. There's ego-oriented motivation,
Okay.
and that's when you're mostly focused on external rewards or how you measure up against other people. Like maybe you want to win a competition or get praise from someone. And then there's task-oriented motivation. And that's when your motivation comes from a genuine interest in the task itself. You want to get better because you enjoy the process of learning and improving. And this type of motivation, the task-oriented kind, it's much more likely to make you want to keep going, you know? You're more likely to persevere, to tackle those challenges head on, because it's not about what other people think, it's about your own personal growth.
I think everyone listening knows someone who's super competitive.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they have to be the best at everything. And then if they're not the best.
Well, they just give up.
Right, exactly. They lose interest. But if they actually enjoy what they're doing,
Yeah, that's the key.
they'll stick with it.
Exactly.
So motivation's huge. But let's move on to that other big thinking skill, metacognition. Now, what's the working definition we should have in mind for that one?
Okay, so metacognition, basically it's thinking about your own thinking.
Whoa.
It's that awareness of what's going on in your own mind. Like if you're learning something new, metacognition would be being able to step back and say, okay, how am I approaching this? What strategies am I using? Is this working for me? It's that higher level thinking about your own thought processes.
So it's not just about knowing stuff. It's about knowing how you know stuff.
Exactly. It's about understanding how your own brain learns best, what your strengths and weaknesses are as a learner, and knowing what strategies you can use to make the most of your learning. And traditionally, it's been broken down into three main parts.
Okay.
So first, you've got metacognitive experience, and that's like your in-the-moment awareness of what's happening in your mind as you're working on something.
Got it.
Then there's metacognitive control, which is about actually managing those mental processes. It's like, okay, I realize I'm getting distracted. What can I do to refocus?
Right.
And then the third piece is metacognitive knowledge, which is your overall understanding of yourself as a learner. Like, I know that I learn best by doing, not just by listening.
So it's knowing what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's knowing about different types of tasks and the best strategies for tackling them.
It's like having a user manual for your own brain.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's important to note that our understanding of metacognition has evolved over time. Like in the early research, there was this assumption that metacognition was always conscious and deliberate.
Like you had to be able to talk about it to prove you were doing it.
Right, exactly. But now researchers are realizing that some aspects of metacognition might happen more automatically.
Like on autopilot.
Yeah, without us even realizing it. So that broader view of metacognition,
Right.
the one that includes both the conscious and unconscious parts.
It's become more central to the research.
Absolutely. So now that we've laid some groundwork and defined what we're talking about when we say self-regulation and metacognition,
Yeah.
let's get back to the question of how this all relates to DCD.
Okay, so how do those thinking skills help us understand why kids with DCD struggle so much with motor stuff?
Well, the research really highlights how important self-regulation and metacognition are for learning in general, especially when it comes to academic success.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, they're really good predictors of how well students will do in school.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more encouraging is that research shows that these skills, they can be taught.
Yeah.
So the thinking is, if they're so important for school and we know we can teach them, maybe they play a similar role in learning physical skills, especially for kids who are already having a tough time in that area.
So the idea is to take what we know about those thinking skills from the academic world and see if it applies to motor skills, especially in kids with DCD.
Exactly. And that makes sense, right? Because the older ideas about DCD, the ones that focus solely on sensory and motor issues, they haven't really been able to fully explain the full range of challenges that these kids experience.
So it was like a piece of the puzzle was missing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's led to the development of new intervention approaches that specifically bring in cognitive strategies to help kids with DCD.
Okay, like what? What are some of those approaches?
Two of the main ones that the research talked about are the ecological intervention approach and the cognitive orientation to daily occupational performance, or COOP approach.
I feel like we should spend some time on that COOP approach, given its name and all.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really interesting approach. So COOP basically teaches kids this four-step problem-solving strategy that they can use to help them master different motor tasks. And it's often taught using the acronym Goal Plan Dough Check, or GPDC.
So it's like a step-by-step guide for thinking through a motor skill.
Exactly. And each step directly targets those self-regulatory skills we were talking about. So first, you set a JOL.
Right.
What do you want to achieve? Then you make a plan to get there.
Huh.
You think about the steps you need to take. Then you do it. You put your plan into action. And then really importantly, you check to see how it went. Did you reach your goal?
So it's all about being mindful and intentional.
Yeah. And a big part of COOP is this thing called guided discovery. Basically, the therapist uses questions and prompts
To help the child understand and use this whole GPDC framework. And the idea is that the therapist provides a lot of support at first,
Okay.
but then gradually they hand over more and more of the responsibility to the child.
So they become more independent.
Exactly. It's like teaching them to ride a bike. You might hold on to the back of the seat at first, but eventually...
They're off on their own.
Yeah. And the thinking behind all this is that kids with DCD, they might be struggling because they haven't naturally developed those cognitive and metacognitive strategies.
The ones that other kids pick up just through play and everyday life.
Yeah. Like, it's not that they can't learn them. It's just that it doesn't come as easily or automatically for them. So they might have this smaller set of tools available to them when they're trying to learn a new physical skill.
Yeah, and there was some research that showed
Oh, yeah.
that kids with DCD don't necessarily learn motor skills just by repeating them over and over the way other kids might. So practice alone isn't enough. Exactly. It's not just about doing something over and over. It's about thinking about how you're doing it. That's a really important point. So, yeah.
That's a big shift in how we think about this.
It is, yeah.
So one thing I thought was really interesting was that to get a better grasp on this connection between self-regulation and motor skills, researchers have actually turned to looking at what we know about experts in motor performance, like athletes.
Oh, yeah, totally. That's a really valuable perspective because when you compare elite athletes or really skilled performers with people who are just starting out, the research consistently shows that self-regulation plays a huge role in achieving that high level of skill.
So what are they doing differently? Like, how are experts approaching things differently than novices?
Well, one big difference is where their focus lies. Like experts, they tend to actively focus on how they're learning and practicing,
Okay.
whereas novices, they're often more caught up in just the outcome. Like, did they succeed or fail in that particular attempt?
So the experts are more process-oriented, and the novices are more outcome-oriented.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the research has found some pretty consistent differences between experts and novices across those three phases of self-regulation we were talking about.
Right. The forethought, performance, and self-reflection.
Exactly. So in the forethought phase, when they're getting ready to perform, experts tend to have higher self-efficacy. They have this stronger belief in their ability to succeed.
Mm.
They're also more intrinsically motivated, meaning they're doing it because they genuinely love it and find it interesting, not just for some external reward. And the goals they set,
Oh, wait.
they tend to be more about improving their technique or mastering a specific skill rather than just winning or hitting some arbitrary target. And they're really deliberate about their practice.
It's not just random.
No, they have structured routines they follow.
And then during the performance phase itself, when they're actually doing the thing.
Yeah, well, experts are really good at consciously putting those plans they made into action. And they use self-monitoring techniques to track their progress and make adjustments on the fly.
So they're aware of what their body's doing,
Yeah.
and they can adjust as needed.
Exactly. Whereas novices, they might have less clear plans or their plans might not be as detailed. And so their efforts are more reactive. They're just responding to what's happening in the moment instead of proactively guiding their actions.
It's like they're driving without a map.
Right, exactly. And then in the self-reflection phase, after the performance experts, they tend to be really objective about evaluating their performance. And importantly, they link the outcome to specific things they did well or could improve. So if they miss a shot, for example.
They don't just say, oh, I suck.
No, they analyze it. They're like, okay, my release was a little late, or I didn't follow through properly.
Right.
And that helps them learn and make changes for next time. But novices, on the other hand,
They might just get discouraged.
yeah, they might get down on themselves and think, oh, I'm just not good at this. Or
Right.
they might blame it on things they can't control, like a lack of natural talent.
So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. They're not really learning from their mistakes because they're not attributing them to anything specific or actionable.
It's like the difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this whole idea of expertise and how knowledge plays a role, that's another area the research really dives into. They talk about this thing called the knowledge-based approach to studying expertise.
So what's that all about?
Well, it basically highlights that experts, they have this much deeper, richer, and more interconnected understanding of their skill. Like, they don't just know the facts, they know how to apply that knowledge in really nuanced ways, and their knowledge is also organized differently.
Like,
It's more chunked and interconnected so they can access it more easily and use it more effectively. And it's not just about declarative knowledge.
the knowing that stuff.
Right, it's also about procedural knowledge, the
Yeah.
knowing how stuff. So it's not enough to just know the rules of the game.
You gotta know how to play.
Exactly. You have to be able to execute, to put that knowledge into practice. And one of the really key findings here, and this is super relevant to our discussion, is that you can have people who have similar levels of general knowledge about a skill.
Okay.
But it's the experts who are really good at applying that knowledge in a self-regulated way during their practice and performance.
So self-regulation is like the secret ingredient.
Yeah, it's this key ingredient that allows them to take that knowledge and turn it into actual skill. It's what separates the really good from the just okay, even if their basic knowledge is pretty similar. So what this tells us is that being able to manage your own learning.
To self-regulate.
Exactly.
That's even more important than just having the knowledge itself.
Yeah, and this is a really important insight for understanding DCD.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the kids. What does the research tell us about how self-regulation actually plays out in children with DCD?
So there's this really interesting model of motor development that was developed by Annette Wall and her colleagues, and they specifically include metacognitive knowledge and skill as crucial components.
Okay.
And then there's this research method called Think Aloud, where they basically have kids talk out loud while they're performing a motor task.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So those Martinis
Okay.
et al. And Lloyd et al. Studies we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
they used this Think Aloud method to study what was going on in kids' minds as they were trying to complete these different motor tasks. And what they found
Okay.
is that kids with DCD actually verbalized just as much as their peers who didn't have DCD.
So they weren't quiet or anything.
No, they were talking just as much, but the big difference was in the quality of what they were saying.
Ah, so what were they saying that was different?
Well, they tended to make these statements that were either inappropriate or inaccurate in relation to planning or evaluating their performance.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so for instance, they might say they need to throw a ball softer, when the real problem was that they weren't putting enough force behind it in the first place.
Oh, I see.
Or they might focus on keeping a certain part of their body still when the correct technique actually involves movement in that area.
So they're thinking about it,
Hmm.
but their understanding of the task and how to do it is a bit skewed.
Yeah, exactly. And these inaccurate statements, they suggest that the kids maybe have a less complete understanding of the task itself.
Uh-huh.
And they also might not have as much effective knowledge about how to perform it correctly. And on top of that, the researchers also observed that kids with DCD, they made more frequent negative comments about themselves in the past.
Like they were getting frustrated.
Yeah, they might say things like, I'm no good at this, or this is too hard. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're constantly struggling and feeling like you're failing,
Right.
it's going to affect your motivation and your self-belief.
Absolutely. And I feel like that can create this vicious cycle
Yeah, definitely.
where the more you struggle, the more negative you feel, and then the harder it becomes to learn and improve.
Exactly. It's this downward spiral. So those studies were really revealing in terms of how those thinking processes might be different in kids with DCD. And then there's that really interesting study by Sangster from 2009, which focused specifically on kids in the co-op program.
Yeah, that was a big one. So what did that study show?
Well, they looked at kids with and without DCD who were participating in this co-op program. And before the program even started, they found that the kids with DCD, they tended to show lower levels of self-regulatory competence,
Okay.
meaning they were less likely to set realistic goals for themselves, to plan out their actions effectively, or to monitor their own performance. They also seemed to have less knowledge about the tasks they were working on and about their own learning processes.
So they were kind of coming in with a disadvantage.
Yeah, and they also tended to show more negative attitudes towards the tasks.
So maybe less motivation.
Exactly, less buy-in. But then, as the kids went through the QOP program...
Which is designed to help with those very skills.
Right.
What happened?
Well, they found something really encouraging. The kids with DCD who showed the most improvement in their motor skills
Okay.
also showed the biggest improvements in their self-regulation skills.
So the two went hand in hand.
Yeah,
Like
like they were learning how to better plan, monitor, and evaluate their actions. And that was directly translating into improvements in how well they could actually perform those motor tasks. They became more independent in using those GPDC strategies.
goal, plan, do check.
Right. They weren't relying as much on the therapist for guidance. They were starting to internalize those strategies and use them on their own. And they were showing fewer of those ineffective behaviors. Like instead of just randomly trying things,
Right.
they were actually using more deliberate, strategic approaches. And that lines up with the findings from an earlier study that showed that after the Calopo intervention, kids were actually generating these more precise and effective movement strategies. They weren't just flailing around anymore. They were actually moving with more intention and control.
So they were thinking more clearly about what their body needed to do.
Exactly.
And that was leading to improvements in how well they could actually perform those movements.
And the researchers believe that this is because the KEO-EP program is helping those kids strengthen the connection between what they know and what they do.
So it's bridging that gap between knowledge and action.
Exactly. It's giving them the tools and the strategies they need to not just understand the task, but to actually execute it effectively.
I think this is really important for our listeners to understand. It's not enough to just tell a child with DCD what to do or to have them practice endlessly.
Yeah.
We need to explicitly teach them those self-regulation strategies. We need to help them bridge that gap between thinking and doing. And that's what the KEOP program seems to be so good at.
I agree. It's about empowering them to take control of their own learning and their own performance. And as we saw in the research, when kids with DCD are given those tools and that support, they can make real and lasting progress.
All right, so to wrap this all up, what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that understanding self-regulation and metacognition, it gives us this whole new way of looking at the challenges faced by kids with DCD. It's not just about physical coordination, it's also about how these kids think about and approach motor tasks. It's about those mental processes that are happening behind the scenes.
And it's about understanding that those mental processes, they can be strengthened, they can be developed. And
Exactly.
when they are, that can have a huge impact on a child's ability to learn new motor skills,
Yeah.
to participate more fully in their lives.
Absolutely. And it opens up all these new possibilities for interventions that directly target those thinking skills.
Like,
Right. QOP is a great example of how teaching those self-regulation strategies can lead to real and lasting improvements, not just in motor skills, but hopefully in a child's confidence and overall well-being.
and here's one final thought for all of you listening. We've seen this really strong connection between cognitive strategies and motor skill development in kids with DCD. So what does that mean for how we approach learning in other areas where physical skills are involved? How can we better foster that crucial link between knowing and doing for all learners? Think about it. How might these insights apply in your own life, in your work, in your relationships? That's something to chew on. And as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.